Okay, I'd like to welcome everyone to this week's edition of Belonging, which is Imperial as One's exploration of the BAME experience. And this week we've got a very special guest, but just before we go into meeting our guests, I just want us to reflect on the fact that it's next week, Tuesday, will be 1 year since George Floyd was murdered. And a lot has happened in that time. I just want to read this statement for us to consider and ponder on. I can't breathe. 1 year on, but has anything really changed? Protests on the streets, politicians, celebrities, and world leaders taking the knee. An investigation, a trial, a verdict, a conviction, a challenge awaits. But has anything really changed? White police officers are still brutalizing Black bodies. But are we more willing to call it out and intervene? Structural, systematic racism is intertwined in every area of our lives. Open your eyes and you will see. The challenge requires everyone to step up, recognizing that humanity comes in all colors, shapes, and sizes. It's not them and us, it's we. Let's be the change we need to see. I can't breathe. Omar, it's a real pleasure to have you here with us this afternoon. And Omar is a database assistant in the outreach department at Imperial College. And he's going to share his experience. And I tell you, it's a very interesting, we're going to have a really interesting discussion this afternoon. So Omar, I'm going to kick off with my usual question, which is, can you tell us a little bit about your upbringing, about what it is that's helped you to become the man that you are right now?
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you very much for having me on today as well. It's a pleasure to be here, to be able to kind of just tell everyone a little bit about myself. Yeah, so the story starts with, I guess, my grandfather, who is of Indian Guyanese extraction. Before part of our family line became Indian, they were actually Iranian. So my grandfather's surname is, and my middle name even, which is Syed, comes from the Iranian heritage, which is way, way long time ago. My great grandfather, who is my grandfather's grandfather, wrote a lot of the family accounts in Guyana in Farsi. So obviously it wasn't too long ago, but kind of more distant. And then the story kind of continues with my dad, who is of African Jamaican extraction. He moved to this country when he was about 11. My grandfather came to this country when he was very young, didn't really have a lot in his pocket when he arrived, and just kind of hustled his way up to becoming eventually a book publisher, which kind of had a massive impact on me kind of understanding more about my heritage and who I am as a person and kind of what that means, you know.
So, so you're Guyanese, Jamaican, Indian. So you've got quite a mix. Where's your grandmother from as well?
So yes, I would say no, pardon me, grandmother. No disrespect intended. But yeah, my grandmother, who's an absolutely fantastic lady, one of the greatest women in my life, is white English lady. So my grandfather met my grandmother when they were working together. When he moved over from Guyana, he was early 20s. My grandmother was, I think, about 18, 19-ish, around about there. So basically they met very young and they got married, and they're still married to this day, 60 plus years later. So yeah.
That's wonderful. I dare say that they've got a lot of stories that they have probably told you and could tell about that experience, 60 years of marriage, etc. So what was it like for you as a young child, or as a child in your household? What happened? What kind of things did you experience, were you exposed to, which helped you to get your sense of identity and belonging?
So when I was growing up, obviously my grandfather had brought a lot of kind of cultural heritage with him from Guyana,
Mm,
from the Indian side of the family, because when Indian and Chinese laborers were kind of taken over to the Caribbean and South America, they were known as indentured laborers, and they basically were able to kind of make a better way of life for themselves than, say, Africans who'd been unfairly taken to the Caribbean, I might add. So basically, my grandfather came from quite a comfortable upbringing in Guyana. He knew his history. He was very kind of proud about the kind of Indian heritage and the Asian heritage that we had. So I had a lot of kind of influence from the food, the culture, the music, etc. My grandfather has been actively involved in, publishing and just kind of social activism. So basically, when I was a kid, there was a lot of, pictures of him with quite prolific individuals like Mandela, Maya Angelou, and a few other names. So it had a massive impact on me, just growing up and around these giants.
I'm just, it blows my mind whenever you say that your grandfather had pictures of him meeting. I believe you've got a picture of your granddad meeting um, Muhammad Ali. Is that right?
Yes, I
Ma-
do. I'm gonna have to scroll through my phone and pull that one up. Yeah, I'll pull that one up in just a second. But yeah, basically, when I was younger, it was just kind of, this rich tapestry of just kind of, so many influential people that he'd met. But he himself had a massive impact on me, as a young person. So basically I just learned like so much about his history and where he came from, and just basically everything he'd done. He fought hard, so did my dad as well, as black and brown individuals growing up in a country that was really hostile at the time. Nothing like what we experience today,
yeah.
because it was a lot harder back then. But basically it was just kind of like a different era, man, completely different era. So here's a picture of
We can't see it because of your background. What we'll do is we'll try and get it up afterwards. All right.
mhm.
Because we've got our virtual backgrounds on it,
Yeah,
just it goes blank. But never
sure.
mind. We'll see if we can get a picture and accompanying it. That'll be good. All right, go on, try
Absolutely.
it now. Yeah, yeah.
So can you
Oh
see that?
yes,
So that's my grandfather giving a book to Muhammad Ali at a event that his company held in 1982. Um,
that's just amazing.
yeah, basically that was like a huge influence for me.
No, the mere fact to have a picture. Sorry, lights have just gone off here. I don't know. All right, to have a picture of Muhammad Ali and your granddad, that just blows my mind, Omar. Sorry, it really does. It really does. And it wasn't just Muhammad Ali. It sounds like because of the work which he did in documenting the Caribbean experience, the Guyanese experience, etc. And you were there immersed in that. That's just amazing. So
Yeah.
I suspect, I'm just thinking about it from an educational perspective. There was a lot of things which you learned outside of the classroom, which, how did that challenge you when you were inside the class? This is just something that came to me just now. How did that, because oftentimes as young black, maybe it's also because last night I was watching that show Subnormal,
Yeah.
um, and just thinking about growing up and about the cultural references or lack thereof. But you had this in, how did that marry up with your experiences?
So I guess my experience of the British education system in the 90s was quite checkered.
Mhm,
I myself was quite I think teachers at that time used to just brandish kids that they didn't necessarily want to engage with or know how to engage with as being disruptive.
mhm,
So I was quite a drifter. I
mhm,
daydreamed and I've always been really kind of like interested in just learning and a variety of things, you know, creative mindset, etc.
Hmm.
If I'm allowed to say so myself. But basically, yeah, in school it was kind of tough in the 90s because they didn't really know how to kind of, you know, deal with certain kids. You know,
Hmm.
they'd class you as having ADD, ADHD. They'd say you're disruptive. You
Hmm.
know, the kind of intersections of, I guess, your kind of identity in school at that time were kind of tough to get on with, you know.
Hmm.
So basically, from outside the classroom, I learned a lot more outside of school than I did
Hmm.
inside of school.
Hmm.
From my grandfather, my father, and my mother. My
Hmm.
mother chose to send me to the West Indian day nursery. It was
Right.
a day nursery at the time. I think it still exists in North London,
Hmm.
just on the edge of Wood Green. So I was immersed in my culture from a young age.
Yeah.
Obviously, you know, I had a big kind of family involvement in kind of just knowing who I was as a person. So stuff that I didn't necessarily learn in school, I learned outside of school about just, you know, who I am, where I come from, and what that means to me and people around me. So yeah.
That's that's really interesting. And when you've described about your um, heritage and the mixed within your heritage, how did you, because the immersion which your grandfather, your father, your mother, kind of like, how did that play out when you were in the classroom with the other children? How did they perceive you, and how did you perceive yourself in that kind of setting?
It was quite interesting because when I was in primary school, I went to primary school and infant school in North London, where, you know, at that age you don't really, no one pays kind of much mind or attention to kind of who you are as a person. They just kind of, you know, it's a very multicultural environment. But then when I went to secondary school, I went to a predominantly black secondary school, which was great for my kind of, I guess, feeling comfortable. I felt comfortable, but people didn't necessarily know how to kind of respond to me as a person because
Hmm.
they knew that I was mixed, but I, even amongst, you know, other mixed students, I was the only one who looked like myself. And I'm not
Hmm.
saying that to sound brazen and arrogant, not that I think that I look any better than anybody else or anything like that, but I
Hmm.
was the only person of my extraction who had obviously had like a mixture of just other things which were more complicated. So it was kind of, people didn't immediately know how to respond to that. They,
Hmm.
they kind of saw me as a person who I myself identify as black or mixed. I'm happy with either one. Obviously, you know, I just had friends from all over the place. I never thought, you know, "Oh, I'm not going to talk to you because you're X background." Basically, I just got on with everybody. But basically, in terms of just identifying with the student body, yeah, it was a bit tough at times, you know, especially in
Yeah.
secondary because they didn't know where to quite categorize me as a person. And it had an impact on basically just how people responded to me at that time, you know.
Hmm. Hmm.
Then got to know me and, you know, kind of figured out a bit more about me. Everything was more routine, should I say.
Yeah. Yeah. So it was the drawback, or there wasn't not that rich tapestry. Did that help you to, did that help, would you say that helped you to fit in, or did you feel more of an outsider? How would you categorize that, if you can categorize it, if that makes sense?
Yeah, no, no, good question. I mean, I think that it helped to kind of provide me with some grounding. It helped
Hmm.
me to kind of identify with just many people, and obviously understand that, you know, regardless of being a mixed person, most of my heritage is Black African. And
Yeah.
I say that because yes, I'm Caribbean, but before that, I describe it as African by way of the Caribbean,
Yeah.
because obviously we weren't chosen to be dropped off there. We were
Yeah.
taken possibly, etc. You know, we all know the history. So basically, even though I identify as mostly black, you know, kind of understanding the other sides of my identity was quite kind of like, yeah, it was a weird time at times. Do you know what I mean? It was
Hmm.
like yeah, it was really kind of interesting to try and figure out more about yourself based upon family history and other things, you know.
Yeah. 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 And I just like it because I like your story because you've got that strong cultural heritage which your father and your grandfather were supplying you with throughout your from a very early age, almost protecting you against what may have been coming. So you had a good, is that right? You had a good, strong sense of who you were, so that even when you were then placed in these other situations, would you say you coped well in those situations?
Yeah, definitely, definitely. I'd say that my father being of Jamaican extraction, but before that, we actually have a strong Maroon heritage in our line.
Mm-hmm.
So my grandfather's mother, sorry, my father's mother, her side of the family were of Maroon Jamaican descent, if I
Right.
can describe it as that. So basically, that's kind of like the closest link that we as Caribbeans would have with our West African ancestors. So obviously, there's a town in Jamaica called Akompong, and basically it's got a Ghanaian name. The community's mostly been left alone for the last, 150 plus years to kind of basically just have their own thriving community, and they're very, very close to kind of the West African origin. So yeah, it helped me to kind of learn to be proud of my heritage.
Yeah.
I've always known who I am, even though at times it might have been a little bit kind of conflicting about kind of where to fit in. Because obviously, there's so many different identities going on. It was kind of easy for me to say that I knew where I was from, culturally and historically, and also was proud of that. My dad imparted a lot of values in me that,
Yeah.
hold your head higher and basically be proud of who you are as a person.
Yeah. I remember when we were discussing, because I always see you as someone who's very active in promoting the Caribbean and the things. Would you say that that stemmed from well, I'm pretty sure it stemmed from the influence from your granddad, but tell me how that developed. What was it that they did to encourage that?
So yeah, my grandfather's always been kind of about the struggle of the people. My grandfather basically yeah, he's always been proactive in kind of, like the kind of political sphere, and also just kind of social issues. When he came over to the UK, the intention was to basically study and go back to Ghana with, an education from the UK, and obviously help to kind of get the country on its feet. Obviously, I think this was at the time before independence even. So basically, it's just kind of about helping to give back to the society that you were raised in, etc. Obviously, he ended up staying on in the UK because he met my grandmother, and
Yeah.
obviously had a family, so obviously that made sense. But yeah, his kind of grounding in politics and kind of like social issues provided me with a lot of context about who I am,
Mm-hmm.
and just kind of helped me to educate myself about issues that affect many of us. So I remember when I was 12 years old going on the Rock War demonstration. It was me, my grandfather, and my mother, and I just remember being in solidarity with hundreds of thousands of other people marching through the streets to Hyde Park, and yeah, it was a really formative memory for me. It
Mm-hmm.
really really kind of indented on me and just kind of brought me further into the fold of like issues to do with the Caribbean via my grandfather and my dad.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Because that must be really a powerful thing, to be marching with so many other people and knowing the purpose for the march. And then, so how has that then, can you give us some illustrations, examples of how that's led you into kind of the activism which you participate in now, if that's all right?
Yeah, of course. So I mean, having that kind of grounding of understanding that there are things that are going on outside of our country, outside of the UK, that are kind of being influenced by the UK and by, richer countries, and that aren't fair and are injustices towards other people. It made me angry.
Mm-hmm.
It made me angry understanding that these injustices were taking place, and also coming from a history of, having our ancestors were slaves, etc. Our heritage was taken away from us on one part. I can't say that necessarily 100% for kind of the Indian side of my family, because when Indians were taken over to the Caribbean and South America as indentured laborers, they were allowed to keep their heritage. So
Hmm.
obviously they're very much in touch with their traditional values. So obviously knowing that my history had been partly affected by such conflict and, you know, a horrific past, it kind of made me want to just do what I can to basically help to kind of even out the landscape, you know, from a kind of perspective of just understanding these issues and just helping to just do whatever I can, even if I can make a difference for one person, you know,
Yeah,
just try and do what I can, you know.
yeah. No, I totally understand that. It's about keeping the voice going, keeping the activism, keeping it real in people's minds, because otherwise it's quite easy to forget or to just ignore or just not see the atrocities which are happening elsewhere. What other things would you say has been a major influence in your life?
I mean, so my kind of traditional, I guess my approach, well, my kind of grounding in education kind of came from the creative side. So I was always involved in like the creative arts. I actually, you know, had kind of like a great understanding of like how the arts basically connected with, you know, just the storytelling, you know. I think a big part of you know, Caribbean heritage is storytelling. You
Hmm.
know, sit down and listen to my grandfather telling me stories from, you know, 60, 70 years ago. He's got a fantastic memory. And kind of like, you know, the storytelling and the artistic side had a huge impact on me because obviously my dad's a photographer. So obviously, you know, he captured some quite interesting images over the years, you know, through the trade union movement to
Hmm.
just like politics and
Hmm.
just, you know, everyday life, music and stuff. And I think music was one of the biggest educators for me to this very
Right.
day. You know,
Yeah.
powerful part of my education.
So, so arts and so arts has always been in around you, from your granddad with his publishing and with your dad with his photography. Those are the things which immersed you, were immersive around you. And then combining that with the political activism, how would you like to develop some of those things?
Man, that's a good question. To be honest with you, I just wish to just kind of keep on connecting with as many people as possible. You know,
Hmm.
I to be honest with you, my friend base encompasses mostly people from all over the world, really.
Hmm.
But one of my oldest friends, one of my dearest friends, is actually from Japan. So, you know, I've kind of got a grounding of just having, you know, like just I don't really see culture when I'm getting to kind of know a person. Do you know what I
Hmm.
mean? I just
Hmm.
kind of see like personality and
Hmm.
then just kind of get to know people based upon their personality and kind of just go with that kind of vibe. So yeah, in terms of tying in, you know, the arts and kind of, you know, just making a difference, or if I'm allowed to say that, just basically I want to just keep on learning, man.
Hmm.
I'm so keen to keep on learning and
Hmm.
basically just yeah, I know that it's kind of, people say don't dwell on the past, and that's not what I try to do. I'm trying to basically, it's just that, like, you know, the past lives in all of us. Do you know what I mean? I'm
Yeah.
trying to capture that and make sure that, you know, we keep on learning and just, you know, progress and not go backwards, you know, because a lot
Yeah.
of things happened in the last 5 6 years that have been a step backwards. It also, it feels like it, you know.
Yeah, no, I definitely understand what you mean by that. What I'm going to do is I'm going to open up, because I've seen quite a few interesting questions in the chat already, right? So I'm going to ask a few people if they would like to ask some questions, and then I want us to just dwell on a few other things which you've already mentioned. Um, I think I saw one from Dawn. Dawn, or was it Clarissa? Clarissa. We'll go with Clarissa first and then Dawn. Clarissa, if you could ask your question, please.
Yeah, thank you so much, Omar. It was really lovely hearing about the rich cultural backgrounds that have formed you. And my question mainly was around your experience of growing up with these mixed cultures. Like, how did you um, like, what advice would you have for future parents about how to support children of mixed heritage, how to allow them to embrace their different cultural backgrounds, and face the possible challenges of being someone from a someone from mixed heritage and dealing with that in the outer world?
Fantastic question. I would say, I mean, to be honest with you, I'm just one person, but obviously in terms of from my own perspective, I think one of the key things about kind of, understanding, life as a mixed person is to kind of just allow your kids to kind of, formulate their own kind of opinions of their cultural identity through organic education. It's important that we don't enforce certain things on our kids against their will. Obviously, you want to make sure that, we want to make sure that our kids are educated, etc. But I think for me, an important part has to kind of, be able to kind of understand who I am as a person from a young age, not be ashamed of, any side of my identity, and then just, allow myself to kind of explore that independently. You know what I mean? I think it's been super important to kind of travel. I think it has been like one of the biggest educational experiences in my life. And I think that was an important part of my life is when I was younger, like, just certain family holidays, or, traveling to even the English coast down on the southwest of the country, just getting to know different cultures and just kind of allowing your kids to kind of explore and get to know loads of different people. Don't necessarily try and like pigeonhole or blockade your kids from interacting with certain people, unless obviously the person is blatantly criminal, then obviously we got a problem. But generally speaking, like, allow your kids some kind of independence, I think, is a key thing I would say.
I
Thank
like
you.
that. Thanks, Clarissa. That was a good question, and I know that it resonated with a number of people in the chat about allowing, how do you get that balance of ensuring that the cultural identities are that children are allowed to know what their cultural identities are and formulate who they believe that they are based on that, as opposed to it being imposed upon them. Yeah, but it is very important. I think the way that your granddad, your dad, and your mother have kind of like put all of those influences into you has been really good. There's another question which I was just thinking about, because I remember you said that your granddad was from Indian extraction and your mother was white English. I remember from our discussion that you said that you grew up kind of like your father was a Muslim, or not your father, your grandfather was a Muslim, and your grandmother was a Christian, and how that impacted. Can you elaborate on that? Because that's, again, not just a clash of, it's almost like a clash of identities on a religious basis, if that makes sense.
Yeah, of course. I mean, to be honest with you, religion has been such a hot topic for thousands of years, hundreds of years. But I think we get that the three religions that have been at each other's throats all started in the same place, known as the Abrahamic religions.
Yeah.
Obviously, the AKA Semitic religions as well. So basically, when we're talking about, Judaism, Christianity, and Islam, they all started, in the same place. But basically, coming back to the question, yeah, my grandfather, his side of the family are originally Muslim faith. They were obviously raised as so. So when my grandfather moved over and obviously married my grandmother, obviously that was a huge deal at that time. We're talking, when racism was rife, it was kind of unheard of that, an Indian Guyanese Muslim man would be marrying a blonde-haired, blue-eyed, white Christian English lady. It was just unheard of. So they were bucking the trend way before it was even potentially like seen as being normal for people to love each other. Do you know what I mean? So yeah, I was raised kind of amongst two-faced, obviously more so as a Christian, just because the church was more local to where I was, and obviously I went to C of E schools, but I had a grounding for understanding Islam as well. So obviously when I went to Canada to go and visit my grandfather's mother, Ma, as we refer to her, I would pray with them. And obviously we had times of where I'd be over there during Ramadan, or I'd be over there during Eid. And obviously I kind of understood the importance of you know, that side of my heritage, you know. So obviously we had things like halwa, which is kind of a snack that you have, you know, around about the holy period in Islam. So yeah, it was, you know, it was really important for me to understand both of these religions, you know.
Fantastic. That's fantastic. I'm seeing people singing your praises about things which you've been doing. A Twitter account for CLS. Hannah's mentioned that in the chat.
Thank you. Appreciate it.
No, that's great. Just coming back to that idea about not a conflict within the religions, the respect for the two different religions. How has that influenced your journey as you are now?
Yeah, I mean, to be honest with you, it's tough, because obviously, you know, there's a lot of, you know, people thinking like you have to choose a side, and you know, a lot of this moral conflict, etc. But to be honest with you, when you look at the holy books of both religions, there's, you know, there's kind of like a certain mutual respect. And I'm not saying that, you know, these conflicts don't exist, because they do. I think where the problem has been, where kind of people have misunderstood each other's cultures. I mean, for example, like Christianity wasn't native to the Caribbean at all, or to Africa, but obviously it was kind of used as a tool. I think religion is a very powerful thing, but I think sometimes it's been used as a tool for negative means, which is not the purpose of it. And for me, I kind of acknowledge that has been a part of it. But to be honest with you, I just have a great and deep respect for just religion on the whole, because I feel like it's been so important to billions of people across the world. And I think you have to kind of respect that. Do you know what I mean? It doesn't, when it comes down to it, your personal views are your personal views. You shouldn't enforce those upon other people. And I'm saying that from the perspective of, if you are an atheist, you don't have the right to say to someone else who's a believer, oh, you know, what you believe in is wrong, blah, blah, blah. Each to their own, man. That's kind of been my approach, I guess.
I like that approach, actually, because it's kind of like fitting with recognizing everybody's humanity. Everybody has a right to choose what they would like to believe in. And who am I, who are you, who is anybody else to say what we believe is wrong, etc. As long as we can demonstrate respect for each other and maintain that respect and uplift our humanity. What would you sorry, I just saw a message on there which seemed a bit strange, and I haven't seen it before. What would you like to see going forward? What would you, if you had, just going forward for your life, what would you want to develop? Where would you like to be, I suppose, is the question I'm trying to ask. In, say, 3, 4, 5 years' time, what would you like to have accomplished?
That's a bold question. Probably I would have liked to have devoured the biggest pizza on the planet. No, but in all seriousness, oh man, to be honest with you, I would just like to have just done whatever I can to just keep on getting to know people, keep on building bridges. Do you know what I mean? And I'm not saying that to basically say that, oh, you know, problems don't exist, because problems do exist. You know, we have a lot of problems right now that need our immediate attention. And you can't just, you know, pat yourself on the back after 5 seconds of good work and say, that's it, we can rest on our laurels. I just want to basically keep on learning, keep on progressing, and just, you know, just be of help to just anyone. Do you know what I
Yeah.
mean? Just try and do whatever I can to just help, or, you know, just keep on learning and just keep on progressing, I think. Yeah. If that's a kind of comfortable enough answer.
It's fine. It's a really good answer. I'm going to just pull you back on one thing though, because I'm just thinking about your activism work and what you've done, because it was, I don't know if people know, but it was because of your introduction that we had David Commission last week, and that, I believe, is part of your links through the Caribbean Labour Solidarity Group. Am I right to say that? So
Yeah.
tell me, what is it about that kind of group which has attracted you, and what would you like to see come and develop from that group?
So, you know, CLS, we do a lot of we're a community group. We do a lot of work to basically just help the legacy of help right some of the wrongs that have happened in the Caribbean over the last few hundred years. You know, the problem has been there's a lot of aggressive imperialism that has taken place, you know, in the Caribbean and in the South American, Central American, North American region. So basically, we're just trying to help better the lives of people that have historically been oppressed. So I think basically through CLS, you know, I was able to kind of just bridge the gap between, you know, Imperial College London and you know, the University of West London and Barbados. Obviously getting David on was a huge pleasure. And I've got to say, hats off to yourself, Wayne, as well, because Wayne actually spoke at an event we did on COVID-19 a few months ago, and it was just a huge pleasure, man. I was really like kind of excited about just getting you in and just kind of, you know, having yourself, Donald and William speaking. And it was just like, you know, three very well educated Black men who are able to kind of help our people and just provide information for people on the whole. You know, that was a huge pleasure. That was like my first foray into actually doing more of the event stuff for CLS. And obviously, like, I've just tried to bring us into kind of the 2021 sphere by getting us on social media instead of just relying on snail mail or email. So yeah.
No, but that's because one of the things which I'm really interested in, and I appreciated it when I did come to the event, was kind of like that, almost like a disconnection between second and third generation Caribbean young people with the experiences of the individuals who are currently in the Caribbean, because it's almost like that's no longer our home, if you get what I mean. So it's, how do we overcome that challenge of it not necessarily feeling like home? And then there's that could be the conflict between parents and children to say, but that was my home, you know, but first generation or second generations are looking at it and saying, now that's where you were born, but I'm here, I'm British, right? Do you see what I mean?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I completely dig where you're coming from. I mean, to be honest with you, yes, we may be born here, but our roots didn't just start here. In terms of those of us who are British, and that applies across the board to anyone who identifies as British, because you go way back into like British history. Obviously, this country was conquered and influenced by many cultures. The English language within itself was influenced by, it counts as a Indo-European language, originally coming from India, you know, thousands of years ago. So, you know, we have to acknowledge that we as a species are influenced by just everything, so many things around us. So we can't be ignorant of that, you know. I think when it comes to just kind of thinking on, you know, people like myself or the generation who'll come after me, you know, you got to acknowledge that your roots are more than just kind of just about being just in Britain and, oh, you know, I'm British, that was your story, that was your history. You have to, you know, you have to ground yourself, you have to be humble, and you have to like educate yourself about the struggles that your parents or your grandparents or your great grandparents went through. You know, Whether or not you're proud of that is completely up to you. But I think
Yeah,
you've got to at least acknowledge that, you know.
yeah. It's there's a well-known saying which says a man who doesn't know his history is like a tree without roots, because you just don't have a grounding. There isn't anything there otherwise. So, and especially when you think about the lineage and how some people can trace back their lineage for hundreds of years, and other people, it's just maybe 1 or 2 generations we're able to trace back. And that whole robbery of history is something that we all, I think we need to at least be able to look at and have an open and honest discussion. And I think what David was saying last week, and I'm pretty sure that you would agree with regards to reparation, because of the influences that's happened, is something that I think we should really try to push towards, you know.
Yeah.
Um,
100%. I mean,
yeah.
to be honest with you, I think reparatory justice is a huge thing that we need to keep on the agenda. You know, we're not talking about, oh, you know, just compensation for the Windrush generation. We're talking about hundreds of years here. You know, there are monuments, there are kind of, you know, institutions, there are buildings, there's things all over Europe and the Western world that have been built off of the backs of profiteering, raping, and pillaging other people's cultures. And I think that's something that we need to kind of, you know, keep on the agenda in terms of getting some reparatory justice for. You know, there's been a lot of work that's been done by, say, for example, you know, Professor Sir Hilary Beckles, and obviously, you know, people, you know, from the University of the West Indies themselves. You've got the CARICOM Reparations Commission. I'd suggest for anybody to look that up. They're doing a fantastic job of getting, you know, reparations on the agenda for Caribbean and African peoples. And I think it's just something that's the world over, even if you're from, you know, even if you're Asian, you're African, you're South American, Central American, indigenous, you know, there's a lot of injustice that's happened, and it needs righting. You know, I think reparations is something that is a huge concept for many people, you know, and I agree with that sentiment.
No, that's fantastic. Omar, it's been an absolute pleasure, as I knew it was going to be, to have this discussion. You know, I want to see your photo, or your dad and your granddad's photo album, which is going to be your photo album, because I know that you just, I don't know if it was that you just wanted to name drop Muhammad Ali, Maya Angelou, you know, all of these big names, but it's absolutely fantastic, you know, absolutely fantastic. And we want to just kind of like continue to work together, to make the change that we want to see, because that's what we're going to have to do. We have to make that change together. And I know that you're a strong young man who's dedicated to seeing that change become a reality.
Thank you very much. Well,
yeah,
thank you to yourself for having me on, and thank you very much for everyone who's tuned in. I wasn't expecting even one person listening would have been like, fantastic. Thank you to everybody, and thank you for the kind words. I really appreciate it.
It's been absolutely brilliant having you on this week. So this is my usual custom at this time. What I'm going to do is just, excuse me, just let everyone know what's coming next week. So next week, we're going to have Krishrika Patel, who is the interim post vice chancellor and dean of health and life sciences at the Montfort University. So she's going to be coming and giving us her story or her experiences of belonging. And if you haven't been able to see this recording live, or if you want to see any of the other recordings which we've done for belonging, then you can go to our tiny URL, our YouTube site at tinyurl.com/belonging-IAO. So it's been really brilliant having Omar here this week. Tune in again next week, bring a friend, and we can have some more discussion. And we're going to have a little after party now anyhow. So if you want to stay on the line, please do. Just